Hi, my name is Joe Gomes. To do a follow-on on what we've spoke about before, specifically with the results of Africa Pro that I had this year. We were lucky enough to do quite well. We ended up winning 2 of the races. I think I'm under correction. It was race 4 and race 6, I think. Our birds came very well. The other thing is then in the final, we had what you would call an equal winner, which was the 4 birds landed. We ended up 3rd, which we were also once again very, very happy about. And then my other pigeon came 12th, and then a couple more in the top 100. I can't remember exactly where the other birds came, but there were a few more. The birds that I bred were all basically, as I stated before, new birds, all out of brand new pairs, new pigeons I'm creating, new bloodlines and crosses, my own stuff basically, and a bit of this and a bit of that. And I try and mate the birds in such a way that hopefully they'll breed some decent pigeons. The other achievement we had there, we had the 2nd ace bird called Romeo, which flew very well, and he managed to end up 2nd ace bird, which is, I think, not a bad thing for the pigeon's achievement. The previous year, his 2 full brothers were the 2 best birds in the whole Gauteng combine that I flew in, my last year of competitive flying. And it shows you, obviously, a good pair breeds good pigeons, and that's the birds you have to send to these big races. You know, you got to try and send your absolute best. Right, this is Romeo. He was the 2nd ace bird at Africa Pro. He flew quite consistently. We acquired him back, so I'm breeding. I've already sent children of his to Africa Pro, 2 daughters of his, the first round, and I mated him with a hen Star. I'll show you now. That was 3rd final. Now, Romeo is bred out of a pigeon that I raced by my old partner, Ferdinand and Joe Gomes. His number was 2343. He was basically out of a Josh Tonne cock that I selected in Belgium by Josh and crossed with one of my hens of my family of old, Joe, that was a 3-time winner for me. The mom is then out of a pigeon that was bred out of a pigeon we call Kroppie. No pedigree. I don't know what Kroppie's pedigree. I can just tell you he breeds many winners, many winners, and crossed with some Gabi van den Nabele blood off a pigeon called Sorina from Romania. So that's basically him. And like I said, the year before that, 2 best birds in the whole combine. Right here we have the nest mate of Romeo, the bird that was the 2nd ace at Africa Pro. His sister, I bred some beautiful babies out of her. It's quite interesting. I had the privilege at Josh Tonne to handle Sedna. Sedna was one of Josh's great long-distance pigeons, and what a magnificent pigeon. I had the privilege to handle her. She was an old pigeon, but still a magnificent pigeon in the hand. One of the most beautiful pigeons I've ever handled. And this one looks a lot like Sedna. It's quite interesting. This is obviously a great granny. But yeah, let's see. I have sent a child of this one this year to Africa Pro. Let's see how she goes. We can just live in dreams and hopes. Let's see. But she's very nice. She's a lovely girl. Okay, this is Star, the bird that ended up 3rd or equal winner, whatever you want to call it, in Africa Pro. I think it was about a 2nd between her and the first bird. She's also bred out of some of my top birds, a pied cock that's got old Joe, and her mom is daughter of Jet, my champion pigeon, that also unfortunately is there at my old partner. So also birds that their pedigrees are basically my bloodlines, that over the years I've selected them and I've manufactured them, you know. And that's basically how it goes. Here we have, her name was Jetstar. She was 12th final at Africa Pro. She's bred out of my cock Jet. Once again, I don't have him here by me. with a young hen. This is a first baby that's basically bred out of local bloodlines. It's got a little bit of the Tom Locke blood, Arnie Maury blood, and also Old Joe. So that's a bit of a mix and a match here, but this bird flew very well. She was quite consistent, especially the harder races. Although the final wasn't hard, but the longer races, she decided to start pulling up her socks. And she's bred me beautiful babies already. The Africa Pro race being its inception year, the first year, I personally, not because we did well, I think it went extremely well. You know, any one loft race is a challenge. It has different challenges. And including then the fact that you have to deal with overseas pigeons, it makes it even a harder challenge to get everything going, the animals out of quarantine and all those bits and pieces that happen behind the scene that we don't realize. So I think personally, the management of those birds was very, very good. The results were very good in the sense of birds coming back from the final race. The pigeons, the losses were minimal towards the longer races, which was wonderful, I think. And I think it's a positive sign. Hopefully it'll go from strength to strength. But as I say, I was very, very happy with the way the race was raced. I would have liked it to be a bit harder. I made no bones about it. But then again, who knows? Being harder, we might not have had birds up there. So we must be glad for what we get. The other one loft race I've participated all along has been Dinner King. We've had quite good success in the previous years. Mostly when the birds arrive, I have a bird up there in the front. 2 years ago, I think there was about 3 or 4 of them close to on the drop. This year I was also, I can't remember exactly, but I was there with the first base birds, I think. And another loft that is very, very well run. I think the birds have a fair chance there. And I think it's so important that the people that train the birds are pigeon people with pigeon success behind them. Sometimes I think a lot of these one loft races, people open the loft and it's a little bit not so successful because it is a big challenge to train those pigeons. I think it's a little bit more difficult than training your own birds in your own backyard. The last season, as I've said, I don't race anymore, but my partner down at Biggersdorp, Peter Kukamur, myself and Chris, his son, I breed babies and I send them down there and they fly under Stormberg Hawker. We were the union champions there. The birds did very, very well. Ended up with a silver medal in the long distance of Sampu and a couple of other nice achievements. So we were very, very pleased because the birds are really, it's the 3rd year flying down there. Every year they've done well down there. It's a different type of racing. The birds are very, very far apart. The lofts, I'm under correction, but I think the span of the area is something crazy like 650 kilometers, the area of that whole union. So it's a different type of racing, you know, weather changes, but nevertheless, to be consistent, I suppose, is a sign of some quality. And we were very, very happy and fortunate to do so well this past year. I think he won the baby averages as well, and I think he ended up second. So he was the overall champion, first babies, and I think second in the old birds, which is a wonderful achievement for a young man as well. You know, to select birds for one loft races, it's, I think, almost more difficult than racing pigeons in your own loft, because the simple reason is there's a limited amount of birds that you are sending to a loft. I'm not talking about people that send 150 birds and that's a different story. I'm talking about your normal fancier that wants to send maybe 5 or 3 or 10 or whatever. You know, in your own loft, you normally breed about between 60, 70, sometimes over 100 babies, and a couple of them fly well. So now with a one loft race, you don't have that luxury of numbers. So I personally feel you must even be more strict. The ones you want to send must be your absolute best because of all the challenges that face those birds. it's easy to say, yeah, but that one guy's sending 100 birds to my 5. Well, if you want to have a glimmer of hope, you must send your absolute best birds. Because otherwise, if you're already lowered in the numbers and you don't have the class there, you're going to struggle. That I figured out a long time ago. And obviously, luck on the day plays an immense role. So we need both things to be in line. You know, best pigeons you can send, as strict as you can be, and hopefully, as I keep telling people, don't use birds that are always requiring medicine. It's a big advantage if your birds don't require medicine, because even though the people at the one loft races do give them medicine, that's not a problem. It's just that the birds aren't dependent on medicine, and then they will fly much better. The risk of them getting sick, before they even get to race, is lower. Once a bird has been sick, even if he apparently gets healthier, that bird normally is never the same as a baby that's never been sick. And that is the most important thing. And, in your own loft, you can spot that. In one loft races, you can't. So that's, I think, the big plus. The best birds, and hopefully birds that don't get sick that easy. So it's easier said than done, but you have to strive for that. My breeding strategy would be as follows. In my previous lofts, I only kept a few pairs, up to about 15 pairs of birds, and then dwindled them down as I worked with the birds. But obviously now with this new group of pigeons, which will be our 3rd year now, I started with a lot more, and I've sort of started dwindling them down to things that I want in a pigeon. Pedigrees don't mean much to me as long as the bird is what I want in my hand. Obviously, good birds breed good pigeons. I mean, I understand that. But it's got to be a bird that can stand up on his own, not just because of his pedigree. And I try and then use those birds that fit to my ideas of pigeons, that I don't want sick pigeons. I don't want birds that are always struggling to fly too many races. They must be tough. And that is the best thing that I can suggest for people. I know there are people that can afford to keep many birds. So that's not a problem, I understand that. But I think if you force yourself to keep only the best birds, your successes will be amazing eventually. And that is the big thing with pigeons. I hate a wild pigeon, I must be honest with you. Yes, there are good birds that are wild, I don't want them. I want a bird to have a relationship with me. I've always found my tamest pigeons were my greatest champions. So that's just an opinion. That's just a trait. The other thing is what I'm using now, after I said for about 3 years, is I'm starting to use birds in the stock loft that I have bred. So I've raced them, or Chris has raced them down in the Cape or Burgersdorp area, and then these ones in the one loft races. Then we're trying to acquire them back so that those birds have been through my hands, through that type of selection, and then I in turn breed with them again, because they are closer to what I want than birds that I get all over the show. I have to start like that. So that is what I've found, and I have definitely found already that the birds I've got back tend to breed better than the birds I got from all over. So my birds that I've created, they tend to breed me birds that I'm happier with. Obviously performance is another thing, but the mother of the bird that got 3rd final, it was her absolutely first baby she's reared in her life. The father as well. The father was, I think, won 3 or 4 unions in a row down in the Cape. I brought him back. So it shows you there is some continuity of positivity there. The feeding strategy for me starts at the stock loft. You can't play catch up. I believe a lot of people know that I'm a great fan of peanuts, only because I think it's the most complete seed around. And my greatest birds, I'm talking about my champion birds that I was lucky enough to breed in my life, which are very few, always wanted peanuts. For some reason, they just love peanuts, and they responded positively on it. So I think if a champion bird wants it, there must be something that's in there that the animal requires. And there's nothing wrong with the other foods. I mean, people have many successes with multiple types of feeding. I just do myself. In the stock loft, I use peanuts and a lot of the best grits. I mean, I use the super grit. My birds go through 20-kilo bag almost a week when they're feeding the babies, because as they're feeding, they eat more and more of it. But it's an investment towards your baby, you know. You can't build up later. You've got to do it when they just hatched, and the eggshells of the pair, of the moms, all that quality, it all forms part of the production line type of thing. It's got to work, in my opinion. It's got to be like that. Got to give everything to the mom, and then to the little baby, and hopefully then it'll be a champion baby. And I can tell you, there's not many of them. I'm very strict, and I breed more average birds than good birds. So, yeah, and I've always found that out of 2 babies in the nest, there tends to always be one far superior than the other one. So that's just a personal opinion of mine. You know, and again, you do get 2 good ones in the nest, but I think that's the exception to the rule. My training strategy, it's quite an interesting one in the sense, over many years of racing pigeons and then applying different strategies. You get, when you breed your young pigeons, a lot of people like to train them up in December and January, and up quite far, and that, obviously that's their personal choice. I don't think it's necessary. Maybe those people have got a lot of babies and they've got to sort of sort out their birds before they go into the molt for the following year. I personally don't think it's necessary. I know a lot of my friends that never train their babies up in December and January, and in the following year they're union champion of the babies. Then I've seen people training their birds like crazy in January or even racing races, and they haven't really dominated when the following season comes. So I think it's just a personal preference. I don't think it's necessary. And I think with the price of petrol now, or diesel or whatever, fuel, the average fancier can't afford that. I don't think he needs to even worry about that. Rather wait to get them super fit around the lofts, make them healthy, as healthy as possible. If you want to teach them the baskets, you can do it in your backyard. Let them sleep in the basket 1 or 2 nights, and they'll be fine. I don't think it's necessary to train pigeons up, really. But I'm talking about guys that I know, and including myself, that don't do it. And then we have very good seasons with the babies. I mean, the union champion, or the averages, winning the averages. So it shows you it's a bit of a... and some guys don't even train him far. They train him 30, 40 kilometers just to teach him the baskets. That is okay, but to go far, I don't know. It's just a personal preference of mine. I don't think it's necessary. Now, obviously, when the races come for the adult, you know, during June or early, late May, not early May, late May, obviously some people start training the birds in March, April. I think that's just a preference. I don't train birds close by, but I don't suggest this to the beginner, because I'm very strict on pigeons. I will hit them first toss, young birds, if they're super, super fit and they've got all their flights. I'll hit them no shorter than 100 kilometers first toss. And you find time and time again, you hardly lose a bird. You do lose a few, but that's part of the pigeon culture. I mean, there are losses. But I don't mess around with that. And old birds, I only start training them about 2 weeks before the first race on the road. An old bird that's good enough to be kept as a 2-year-old does not need to be hammered with the babies. In actual fact, I think you shouldn't train your old birds with the babies. You should let the babies, if you're training them on their own, let the babies go struggle a bit and figure their own way out. A lot of times they come with the old birds and they don't really pay attention to the route, and they sort of get almost pamperlang down, you know, whatever the word is, pampered home. And one day when they now on their own, they struggle a bit. Rather let them figure out their own thing. The old birds really, I've had great success starting like that, and the birds seem to enjoy the season longer. There's no secret about it. I love the long distance races. So to me, with no disrespect for the short distance racing, it's to me almost like tossing. So I don't worry too much about those, although it's important if you want to win averages to fly well from the start. I realize that. But the longevity of the pigeon stays much nicer if you don't push him that extra month or as an old bird earlier. Start like in April or March. I mean, the old bird already knows what he has to do. You don't have to reteach him. If he's good enough for a 2-year-old, you should be able to literally take him, get him super fit and throw him 150 Ks and he'll come. He'll come. He won't struggle. Or 200 Ks. I mean, you can do it to babies. I don't know why you can't do it to old birds. So that's just an opinion. I mean, not everybody does that. I realize that. But that's my personal opinion. And I think with the price of diesel and petrol and that, people have to start looking. The average fancier has to seriously start looking at that. My plan for this year is, yes, to include competition in the one loft races. Definitely Africa Pro. My team is there. With Barney as well at Dinner King, my team is there. We'll see how Russell gets along at the SA Masters, which is lovely to see that loft on the go again. I'd love to send theirs again. They got a very competent young man there, Peter, the Gok, which is wonderful to see him taking on those reins. And I think I will definitely be sending birds there. Then obviously we also have the club races down in Burgersdorp, the NOK. It's called the Noord-Oos Kaap Union. We've got babies there and the old birds of last year, some of them. I've taken some of the top birds back here to breed with. So yeah, it's always a give and take situation. We'll see how it goes this year. But I did take like 6 or 7 of the top old racing pigeons. I'm using them again, and I then use their babies in my one loft team. My advice for the upcoming season is really don't rush things. Especially for beginner fanciers that have small teams of pigeons, just be careful. A lot of guys, I've heard them in the club, they've already tossed the birds 200. Where you? And the oaks feel a little bit sort of intimidated that they're falling behind. It's fine for a man to say that that's got 200 pigeons. But if a guy's only got 40 or 50 birds, he can't afford a massive smash where he loses half his pigeons. So rather take care with those birds. It's the birds you have for the season. You can always try and improve the breeding next season. But if you truly want to race, get them fit, extremely fit around the house. And then make sure they are healthy, obviously. If you have to give medicine, you have to give medicine. Make them, I think there are products which help with the birds' homing ability. There are products like Doxy. I don't want to promote any companies or anything, but there's a doxycyclines that help, I think, with the homing of the pigeon, with the sinuses and that. I think that sometimes has a big impact on birds getting lost. So if you give it, some great old fanciers told me they used to give it to 20, 30 days of that stuff before they went onto the road. And it seemed to have cleared up, and the bird can think clearly and find his way home. So I think that's not a bad thing, especially for the beginner. I mean, the experienced fanciers will know what to do. And then, don't be in too much of a hurry to try and win the first race. There are 18 races. I think that's what the season boils down to now. There are 18 races. Rather come in slowly and enjoy your pigeons. A little bit later, you'll see the better, in my opinion, the better races come up in any case. That's the nicest one where it's not so much just all about landing and trapping and that. So the birds have more time on the wing, and the enjoyment, I think, is more for the fancy seeing that little animal. So try again. As a beginner, don't try and rush to try and, it's like having a packet of sweets. You try and eat them all in one day. Don't do it. Try and keep the animal as nice as possible. Don't overcrowd your pigeons. Don't keep too many pigeons. Make sure your lofts are always bone dry. If I can give you a word of advice, make sure your lofts are always dry, because with wet lofts comes so much nonsense. So much nonsense. Even if it's wet just for a little bit, you don't realize 7 days later or 10 days later something pops up, and it's most probably because of that. So rather try and maintain those things. The vent or the airflow of the loft, very important. The ventilation of the loft, very, very important. Make sure your pigeons get fresh air. Make sure the loft is nicely ventilated. Sunlight also, make sure your birds get regular sunlight, especially your stock hens, that they can create and collect vitamin D so that they can absorb the calcium, because without vitamin D a pigeon cannot absorb calcium. So it doesn't help you put all these fancy grits and she never gets direct sunlight. You'll actually see other pigeons sunbathe when they spread their wings. They are actually absorbing the rays of the sunlight and including vitamin D. Anyhow, I hope that this helped you guys. Maybe this can help some people have a better season. Thank you very much.